So there's obviously a lot of attention paid to the presidential election and to the fact that Hillary got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, which is true. But it obscures a lot of really critical facts, including the fact that obviously the Democrats don't have control of either the Senate or the House. The Republicans do. They now have lost 2/3 of governorships, which are also now in the hands of the Republican Party. And they are one state house away from enabling the Republicans to convene a constitutional convention on their own, because they will have 2/3 of the state fully within their grasp, both controls of both houses of Congress. So it's a party that has collapsed as a national political force in the United States. It's not just the presidential election.
But why? Why exactly? I mean, it was still a very close presidential election, so it's not obvious that we would wind up in the place you just described. What is the core problem with the Democratic Party, do you think, right now?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that the Democratic Party ought to be asking, and unfortunately, they're not asking it. They're so obsessed with denouncing Donald Trump, with calling him all the names that they called him during the election, with talking about Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin and Jill Stein and everything else other than that question that you just asked. When the Republicans lost in 2012 to Barack Obama, even though they had control over all these levers of power, they got together, they issued this autopsy saying, here's everything wrong with our party, here's what's wrong with our messaging. The Democrats are showing no signs of any kind of self-critique. Why did they lose? They lost because they favored policies throughout the 1990s, such as free trade, such as getting rid of all the restraints on Wall Street, such as having jobs go overseas, that the Clintons advocated. And they continue to advocate those same policies and then wonder why people in the Rust Belt who have no economic future and no economic and nothing but economic anxiety are abandoning the party in droves. And there's no attempt to examine that or even talk about it.
Interesting. So the party that wins the middle class typically wins the national election, just because that's the demographics of the country. If a bunch of smart Democrats got together to do the autopsy, and I bet at some point they will, they've got to, what specific conclusions would you encourage them to reach? Like, what should they do now?
Well, let's look at what they did in 2016. They nominated a candidate who was a career politician, who was extremely rich and perceived as being out of touch and indifferent to the needs of ordinary Americans. She spouted talking points and focus group approved messaging. And I think they need fresh voices. To begin with, I mean, look at what they did after this debacle in 2016. They went and they renominated as their minority leader in the House Nancy Pelosi, one of the richest members of Congress, who has been their minority leader since 2002, and then made Chuck Schumer the top Democrat in Washington, even though he spent his career serving Wall Street. So I think you need fresh voices, people who aren't petrified of their own shadow, who don't apologize for telling the truth like Tom Perez did, and who think about how to serve not Silicon Valley and the billionaire class and their donor class and corporations, but the people who actually vote and who are really worried about their economic future with really good reason.
It's so you keep coming back to economics and the lack of an economic message. And so, I mean, if you were to sum it up in one sentence, would that be it? They're not telling the average person in the country why voting Democrat would be good for them economically.
Yeah, exactly. They have no affirmative platform. You can call Donald Trump every name in the book, a racist and a fascist and authoritarian, misogynist, and some of that might be true, all of it might be true, but unless you convince people that you're going to make their lives better, then they're not going to go to the polls and vote for you. Maybe they'll abstain, maybe they'll vote for your opponent, but you're not inspiring anyone, and that is the core problem that they don't want to address.